What's up everybody, Matt Moran here for another car review. This is of course the 2018 Lexus LX 570. Huge thanks to Lexus for providing me with this very sweet full-size LX to review for you guys today. Also, huge thanks to the Automotive Video Association for arranging this car and 8 others for the first ever AVA Spring event. The event brought 6 of the best car reviewers in video and myself together to film several iconic cars and some of the top luxury SUVs. So about the LX, well, it's been around for over a decade now and has been getting changes and updates. Now you can see it's wearing, some really crisp looking headlights there that are really futuristic like other Lexus models. Of course, you have the signature new Lexus grille there as well, which was integrated a couple of years ago. And I think actually looks really good in this application. It's again, a very tall SUV, very blocky front there, but it gives it a very imposing stance like you want to have in a huge SUV like this. And going down to the sides there, again, just it's a very traditional SUV shape, and like most other SUVs in this class, it looks very chunky, but again very substantial and large. And then going out back there, you have those nicely new updated LED tail lamps there in the back that look very good, and you have the split folding tailgate as well, which is a cool little feature here. And overall it's a very good looking SUV. I mean, it blends right in with all the rest. It's nothing too crazy, especially in the back there, but up front here I think it nicely distinguishes itself from a lot of the competitors with a little bit of a bolder look than some of the others. As for the interior of the Lexus LX 570, well, it's a very nicely luxurious place to be. So anyway, first things first, sitting down in these seats, you have these nice, large, very soft bucket seats that feel really great. Again, this is a luxury SUV, so the bolstering isn't very aggressive or anything, but it does have a little bit of a bolstering here to, help hold you in place a little bit. And they're just really nice, soft, comfortable seats. They're heated here in this one. And yeah, they just feel pretty good. They have lots of adjustability as well, which is also nice. Next to the steering wheel in the LX here, which is much like any other Lexus steering wheel for the most part, has a really great 9-3 grip though. Nice little 10-2 notches. I like the wood here. Again, adds to the luxurious feel of it. Otherwise, you have your typical Lexus buttons here on the front of it. You have your paddle shifters here. And so overall, I think it's just a good looking and a great feeling wheel to use. Next to the gauges here in the LX, which are again really nicely done and nicely upgraded here, for these newer ones. So first off, you have the analog dials, plenty of them here too, which is good to see. And I really like the little bit of a silvery trim ring you have around them as well. That looks really good. And then right in the middle there, you have a small little screen which does all your basic stuff like you see in other Lexus vehicles. Nothing too advanced or futuristic there. Some of the other competitors do have full digital clusters and things like that. So this is a little more traditional in its setup, but I think it still works really well. It has your basic audio information, trip information, all that type of stuff, and overall I think it's a pretty good set of gauges. Coming over to the center of the dashboard here, right up top, they've nicely upgraded here over the past couple of years. Have this nice huge widescreen display that's also found in some other Lexus models, and it's a really nice setup. Now it still unfortunately does not have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. Hopefully that will be added now that they're starting to add Apple CarPlay at least functionality in the new ES, and hopefully it'll trickle down to the other models here. But it still is very good. I do like the split screen thing, so you can see 2 things at the same time with like maps or whatever on the right hand side, and on the left you can do your audio or vice versa. And everything's pretty easily laid out. You do have this little controller here that some people don't love. It's like a little mouse almost that you have to kind of use, but it also has force feedback so that it does help you to land on the different icons fairly easily. And it's one of those things that takes a little getting used to, but once you're used to it, it actually isn't too bad. So I don't mind that too much. And then you have a few shortcut buttons here also down by the shifter and that little controller. And so overall, a pretty good infotainment system, but again, not super feature packed either. Coming down to the rest of the controls here, you have your climate controls. Also, you have your very nice feeling volume and tune knobs that have a really nice resistance to them. But anyway, you have your traditional buttons here still. You do have these little buttons that do have the lighting behind them, but the actual buttons are physical, which is great to see. And I really like the way that it's set up here. It's almost like a fancy set of drawers or something, some furniture that you have right here in the middle, almost the way that it looks. And I really like the way that's all set up. And so, it's all within easy reach too, which is great. And then coming down, that's where you'll start to find all the storage spaces you have here. So first off, you open up this one, and then you'll see 2 USB jacks, an auxiliary jack, and a power outlet over on the right-hand side. And it's a decent depth. You still probably couldn't fit a normal large smartphone in it, but you could fit some little knickknacks in there, and so good to have that. Coming down, you have another little cover that nicely conceals your cup holders, which are a pretty good size. And then coming back over to the doors here on the left-hand side, you see a nice large map pocket with a bottle holder, which is great to see. And coming back over to the center here, you'll see this center armrest, which does have very nice leather on it, but it's not super soft or padded, just a little bit of padding there, but still pretty nice. And anyway, you open that up, and then you find what is already a pretty large space here, very wide at least, and a decent amount of depth. But you can lift that whole thing up, and then you have way more depth, and you can fit tons and tons of stuff in there. So you can either leave this in and have stuff concealed beneath there, or you can just take this piece out and just have a massive area here that unfortunately doesn't have any additional hookups or anything, but still just a really nice large additional storage space there. So overall, plenty of storage space here in the interior of the LX. The axle space in the LX is also pretty nice. So this is the 2-row version. There is a 3-row version of the LX available as well, but this is the 2-row version. And that second row is really nice and spacious. I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I have about 4 inches of legroom to spare there. Plenty of headroom. There's a ton of headroom thanks to the boxy shape of these here. And so really spacious in that regard. And then the seats actually do also slide forwards and backwards automatically with a power function there. And then you can also recline them with a little lever. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty nice. Now you would look forward and see just those air vents and be like, wow, like you're surprised there aren't climate controls or anything back there. But you fold down that center armrest, and that's where you'll find a nicely padded additional armrest there, and it also has a little storage space in there. But also you'll see your climate controls in there as well. It's all kind of digitized there, and so nice to have those. And then you can also in the front of it pop out 2 cup holders there as well, and you also do have bottle holders in the doors there in the back too. And so overall, it's a pretty good setup, although if you were using someone in that middle seat, then you wouldn't be able to adjust the climate, but not a huge deal there. And overall, I still think it's a pretty good back seat. Trunk space in the LX is also really good, especially since this is the 2-row version, so you don't have to worry about a 3rd row filling up any of that cargo space. So I mean, it's a very large and very tall area as well. Since there isn't any kind of rake to that rear hatch or anything, it's just a traditional boxy SUV. So you have a ton of space to stack things, and plenty of space even just long wise there to fit all kinds of stuff. And so overall, I don't think anyone's going to complain about the storage space here in the LX. All right, so start up and go for a drive. The LX has a nice Lexus key here. It is a really nice design. Of course, a lot of them come with a little leather pouch, but this one doesn't. But anyway, it's keyless entry and push button start, of course. You just leave the key in your pocket, hit the end to start button, and force to life. All right, so setting off in the 2018 Lexus LX 570. So first 2 things I noticed right off the bat here are, first off, the steering is quite heavy. For an SUV, a lot of these SUVs have pretty light steering, and so I was expecting this to feel the same way, but this is really heavy steering, which would make sense if it was like an enthusiast model or something, but considering these things are very heavy and not set up for any kind of sporty driving, I'm not sure why they need super heavy steering, but we'll see how that changes as we go to higher speeds here. Other things to note here though, brakes are very touchy and oddly boosted. It's like, there is some travel to it, but then as soon as it starts to brake, it brakes very abruptly. And so being smooth at low speeds is proving to be a challenge so far. Other things here though, it is very responsive throttle. And the slightest tap of the gas gives it a nice little burst of acceleration here. And so overall, that feels pretty good. I mean, the ride is buttery smooth too so far, even on these roads, which aren't perfect. It's really smooth. It's also pretty quiet in here too. I think, it really feels refined. But we'll go ahead and put it over into sport mode here. And let's turn down on the straight road and see how the acceleration is. And here we go. Kicks down. And it pulls pretty well. So the Lexus LX 570 here has a 5.7 liter V8 engine. That's what the 570 stands for. And so it does 383 horsepower, 403 pound-feet of torque, and gets this thing up and going pretty well for such a large SUV. I think 0 to 60 is like 7.2 seconds. I think the way that the transmission is set up, it's an 8-speed automatic, and I think it is still very responsive to, give you the higher RPMs and the power whenever, it feels like you need it, and it's really responsive with that. So I think it does a really good job of actually feeling sporty in a straight line whenever you're trying to, get a move on in it. Another thing to note is visibility here is excellent in the LX. Of course, you're sitting up very, very high, but you have a very large windshield here to see out of. View out of the sides is great with nice low door sills here, so that's really good. And then view out of the back is pretty good, although that middle headrest does kind of get in your way a little bit, but not a huge deal. And so overall, still a pretty good view. And of course, you do have the 360 camera and backup camera and all that kind of stuff to help you whenever you're in lower speeds and parking spaces and things like that. All right, so now we're on a back road here, nothing too windy just yet, but just, seeing how this feels around a few corners here, and it feels pretty good so far. Again, for what this is, a large full-size SUV. I will say, though, that the steering doesn't feel quite as bad here at some higher speeds. It still does have a decent amount of weight to it, but it's not quite as much. It just seems like it's overly heavy at low speeds in parking lots and things like that, which seems, again, just a little odd. But overall, this feels pretty nice to cruise in. I will say there's a little more road noise now at some higher speeds than I noticed, at lower speeds here. But it still feels pretty good, and especially considering this is a very off-road capable SUV. It's based on the Land Cruiser, which is also legendary, especially other parts of the world. They use those almost exclusively for off-road duty. And so this has those same great bones. You can see all the different adjustments you can make down here in the center for that off-road mode, and all the different things you can crawl with it and all that type of stuff. But anyway, back to the handling. We'll push it around a couple of corners here. And yeah, the weight, the high seating position, that definitely makes itself all very apparent very quickly. The curb weight for these, I had to double check it, and I was kind of dumbfounded by how heavy these actually are, but supposedly these weigh around 6,200 pounds, which, to put that into perspective, that's heavier than a Rolls-Royce Phantom. It's even heavier than Rolls-Royce's new Cullinan SUV. So I mean, it is super heavy. I'm guessing it's all this off-road stuff, and just the fact this is based on a truck platform. It's you got the body on frame thing going on, which is great, for off-roading and stuff, but certainly makes it heavier and not quite as car-like with its handling, which I think a lot of full-size SUV buyers want. But it's just it's really heavy. So I mean, obviously no one buys these things to be backroads carvers, but just be forewarned, you can't really be in a hurry if you got to go around corners in this thing. I mean, it does okay for what it is, but I mean, it doesn't drive badly or anything, and I'm not terrified of putting it into a corner or anything, but it's just it has its limits, like you would fully expect out of an SUV. But really, these things are set up to be cruisers, long distance vehicles, haulers, that type of stuff, and not for hustling it through a back road, of course. And as we're slowing down here for a red light, the brakes still feel weird even at higher speeds. Now, it's obviously not quite as jarring at higher speeds. It is a little bit smoother with its braking, but it still is just, I don't know, there's just weirdly boosted brake pedal that just feels really strange and not quite as natural as basically all the other vehicles you get out there in this segment. So yeah, not the greatest as far as braking goes, but it's certainly something you can get used to. And just pulling onto a highway here, do another acceleration. Yeah, that's one thing I will say is, despite this thing's weight, it gets up and goes really well. And so, I know it's an older V8 here, that isn't the most advanced powertrain these days. A lot of the other ones going to turbocharged units and things like that. But this naturally aspirated V8, I have no complaints with. It does a really good job, although the fuel economy suffers. But again, when you're talking about a vehicle that's this heavy and has a dated engine, it just doesn't make for a very good recipe. So these are rated, I think, 13 in the city, 18 on the highway for combined average of 15. And so You know, I think it's a little bit less than what you get in some of the other competitors that do break into the 20s, at least on the highway, things like that. But, you know, while we're on the highway here, though, this is where this thing is really, you know, it's most comfortable. It is a really great cruiser, and, you know, it also does have all the safety stuff now, so you have the adaptive cruise, you know, the lane keep assist, all that type of stuff, which is nice to have here, you know, to help modernize it as well and keep it, you know, fresh. But another really nice perk about this engine is, although it might be dated and might not be the most fuel efficient, it's proven. And that's one of the really, I think, the edges of the Lexus. Because, you know, pricing for these, I think this one has tested around $86,000. And at that price, you know, there are a lot of compelling options. I mean, that, you know, gets you into a lot of prestigious territory. And I think the edge that this has, than any Lexus really has over its competition that might be similarly priced, is the reliability. But especially here in the LX, you know, since you have this engine, which is also found in the Toyota Tundra, and one of those, I think a year or two ago, crossed 1 million miles. It did over 1 million miles, some private owned one, and it's just amazing that these engines are capable of that, and it was still running great. So, and Lexus have always had, you know, historically very, very strong reliability, great, you know, service experiences and things like that. And I think that is the edge that Lexus provides. Is, you know, while some of the others might be more high tech, might have more toys, more efficient, you know, I don't know how they're going to hold up in 10 years. Whereas this thing, I don't think you have any doubts. This is still going to be solid in 10 years. Still going to be very reliable, you know, pretty bulletproof as far as the engine and stuff goes. And that's kind of the peace of mind you get with the Lexus brand. And I think is a huge selling point, and you know, makes the, you know, that's what really gives this a compelling edge over the rest. You know, it makes up for some of the other things it might lack. And so overall, you know, it's a really nice SUV in that regard. Again, if you want something that's this, you know, off-road based, and you want something that's an actual body-on-frame truck, because otherwise, you know, Lexus makes other, you know, larger SUVs that are also, you know, very nice to drive, and, you know, have better driving manners, you know, as far as handling and things like that go. But, you know, they don't have the truck ruggedness that this does. So I'm really glad that Lexus has continued to keep this around. Hopefully there will be an actual all-new version that's not based on old bones, and, you know, will have a newer engine and, you know, a little bit more refinement to it. But even as this is, like I said, it's still very nice, and they have done a good job of keeping it fresh over the years. So anyway, huge thanks once again to Lexus for providing me with the LX here to review for you guys today. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.